how racist the NFL, or how racist NFL is, or is NFL a bunch of KKK guys with hoods over their heads and with headphones attached to their ears? Now that's the impression that you get by watching or listening to ESPN. I don't know if anybody has ESPN radio, but I don't. I'm sure I could listen to it online. I don't. I'm sure I could listen to their experts. I don't. However, their experts do say that the NFL is racist because, and there are many reasons, A, it doesn't employ bad or good black coaches, or doesn't employ sufficient number of black quarterbacks. Now, one of the most notorious pro-leftist announcers on ESPN is one Max Kellerman, who has his own talk show, and more or less he understands sports. He doesn't understand sociology, and of course he's one of those kindergarten Marxist cops. One of the latest creeds from Max Kellerman, and certainly from ESPN, and it's been a ESPN type of a approach for a long, long time, is that the black quarterbacks are underrepresented, black coaches are underrepresented, there is a need for a Black Coaches Alliance, and there's a need for black quarterback camaraderie or something. Back in somewhere around 2005, and I should have looked it up, NFL hired Rush Limbaugh, the late Rush Limbaugh, to be one of their pundits, occasionally from whatever his headquarters was, probably in Palm Beach. Maybe he was in New York then. Anyway, so Limbaugh opined quite clearly that NFL and the media, which is of course far left-wing, just as the woke NFL is, wants black quarterbacks to do better than they're actually doing, and essentially plays them up as great players where there may not be. Now, Limbaugh got into trouble while talking about Donovan McNabb, who was then playing for the Eagles, and he said that some of the McNabb's performances aren't as great as they thought, and the media plays them up. The media, of course, got mad and talked ESPN, or forced ESPN into forcing Limbaugh's resignation. Now, he did not need the money. When he passed away a few months ago, he was allegedly worth somewhere around $800 million. So that did not impact him from the financial point of view. But of course it would impact, and does impact, people who dare to speak opinions that are highly defined as controversial or opposite to what is preached in the NFL. And so once again, the draft is just over, the NFL, the annual draft is just over. And the media, prior to the draft, was screaming how many top-rated quarterbacks happen to be white, which is true. Many of the top quarterbacks, especially going to this draft, were white, and one of them I think was mixed, whatever. Now how do we counter the kind of claim? How do we counter the fact that the league is not racist, or if it is racist, it's racist toward black quarterbacks? Well, it's very easy, in my opinion. You just look up the record, the actual record of the players drafted, and their success or failures as NFL quarterbacks, which is their job. I mean, you don't pick a guy in the first round to do some, cleaning and equipment managing. And so I went to the NFL Encyclopedia, Football Encyclopedia, Pro Football Encyclopedia. You can go on Wikipedia, you can go to the NFL own site, and just check the draft if any kind of verification is required. In NFL, and I checked the last 20 years, not counting this year because nobody has ever touched the ball this year of all the drafted players. I checked information going back to 2001. And I only checked top-rated players or top-rated picks who went in the first half of the first round. In other words, from 1st to 16th, 32 teams, 16 makes it a nice cutoff point. I talk so much. I should have drank some coffee before. In any case, so the NFL has drafted somewhere around 40 plus different quarterbacks. Some were clear failures. Some were kind of sort of, the guy plays okay and plays a while, but it's not a star. and so he can get mixed grades, and some, of course, great successes. So I checked the number of black players who were drafted, and of course I have a record on different windows, so I'm going to click something, and so we all have the exact data. Of the black players, there were, and I'm going to count, Michael Vick, Byron, well, by name, Michael Vick, Byron Leftwich, Vince Young, Jamarcus Russell, Cam Newton, Robert Griffith, E.J. Manuel, James Winston, Deshaun Watson, Kyle Murray, and Dwayne Haskins. Of those, 4 can be considered clearly successes. Michael Vick, who was in several Pro Bowls, Jamarcus Russell, Cam Newton, who was league's MVP, and Deshaun Watson, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the league last year. Over 4,000 yards, whole bunch of touchdowns. The failures, or Kyler Murray, give him a success too. The failures would be Byron Leftwich, who was 6th player picked, Vince Young, who was 3rd, Jamarcus Russell, who was 1st, Robert Griffith, who was 2nd, E.J. Manuel, who was 16th, and Dwayne Haskins, who was 15th. So when we add up the totals, we see there are 4 positives, and positive in this case is good, we're not testing for COVID, and 6 are bad. And we give one person incompletion, and I think that's James Winston, who was dropped by his original team, with the team that drafted him first, which is Tampa Bay, and then he got Tom Brady. But he's still done, he can still do something. In fact, already thrown for 20,000 yards, although with a lot of picks. And so 4 pluses, 6 minuses, we can argue whether some of those grades are completely accurate, but those are my grades. And I think they're fairly intelligently derived. plus 4 minus 6. So out of 10, 4 were good, 6 were failures. Now we can go and count white players. And it's a long count. David Carr, Joey Harrington, Carson Palmer, Eli Manning, etc., etc., etc. As we get to the last few years, we can actually count the players as being successful or unsuccessful, which is Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones, Josh Rosen. Out of those, of course there are more players, one can count 13 positives, 13 players who have done really well, 8 players who have failed more or less, but who can still perform. So some are out of the league, especially those who have been drafted 20 years ago, like David Carr and Joey Harrington. And we have 6 kind of in-betweeners. One of the people who would now count as a success, one of the quarterbacks, is Ryan Tannehill, who was dropped by Miami and then had 2 phenomenal years with Tennessee. Blake Bortles, on the other hand, let's give him an incomplete too. He was a 3rd player pick, though, so probably considered a failure. Way back in, I think it was 2012, I erased the info, there were 3 white quarterbacks picked in the first round. It was Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, and Christian Ponder, and they all failed. Gabbert is still in the league, but mostly as a backup. He was 11th player, but Locker and Ponder had failed. So let's do the totals now, really quick totals. 13 positives, that's good. 8 negatives, that's bad. 6 incomplete, and some guys we didn't count would be Sam Bradford, who's apparently a Native American, and of course the previous league MVP Patrick Mahomes, who have mixed racial heritage. His mom's white, his dad's black, a former Major League Baseball pitcher. And so we have plus 13 minus 8, which is roughly speaking 1.5 good players for 1 bad one. 1.5 good picks for 1 bad one. Now, of course, we'll lump everything together. Some of those guys were picked at number 1, like Andrew Luck, who was a very, very much a success story and then decided couldn't play anymore from injuries. So the total that we are having is pretty clear. 1 black succeeds for 1.5 failures, and that's high in the first round. Where with white players, white picks, white quarterbacks, the opposite is in reverse. Now, clearly, we can pick, and the teams can pick anyone they want. But the noise about NFL being racist is, in my opinion, is clearly an NFL piffle and an ESPN piffle, because it's a lie. The league is trying to be woke, and it is woke. It is actively protesting racial injustice by picking players where they shouldn't be picked. And that's just my opinion. You can disagree, you can comment if you can comment, or you can just watch and say something or leave a note. Thank you. I am blogger, or now vlogger, come lately.